Otumfuo, Nananum, my lords, ladies and gentlemen. I think I know why I was asked to speak today. It's because my sisters and I are the fruits of a long-term successful Anglo-Asante collaboration, namely the marriage between my English mother and my Asante father. But the connection I've discovered runs much further back. As you know, Nana Prempeh I was exiled to the Seychelles after Asante became a crown colony. Well, the British cabinet that approved the return of Nana Prempeh I to Asante in 1924 included my great-grandfather, Lord Palmer. And the connections don't end there, because when my Asante grandfather's brother-in-law, Nana Prempeh II, became Kumasihini in 1931, his appointment required the consent of the Secretary of State for the Colonies, who happened to be my great-great-uncle, Lord Passfield. In this room today, another family is represented whose ancestor was an important figure in the history of constructive relations between England and Asante. Because Thomas Edward Bowditch, whose descendants are with us here, visited the Asantehene Nana Bonsu in 1817 and 18, bringing back a treaty of perpetual peace and harmony for Anglo-Asante relations on the Gold Coast. And his book, Mission from Cape Coast Castle to Ashanti, is one of the earliest extended accounts by a European of life at the Asante court. People sometimes focus on the 5 Anglo-Asante wars of the 19th century, but between the end of the first, which settled the southern boundary of Asante at the Praya River in 1831, and the beginning of the second in 1863, there were 3 decades of peace. Still, one thing we acknowledge today is the first and only unhappy anniversary of the 3 that we are recognizing, which occurred in the first of these wars. In the third of these wars. For this year is the 150th anniversary of the ending of the Third Anglo-Asante War in 1874, with the sacking of Kumasi by Sir Garnet Wolseley, Sagrenti to us, who entered the capital unopposed and committed a series of what would now be thought of as war crimes. Among the objects of his destructive campaign was a large stone building in the city's center, the Abai, that Nana Bonsu had created, inspired by talk of the British Museum. As Wolseley prepared to loot and blow up the Abai, European and American journalists were allowed to visit it. The Daily Telegraph described it as the museum, for museum it should be called, where the art treasures of the monarchy were stored. The London Times spoke of books in many languages, Bohemian glass, clocks, silver plate, old furniture, Persian rugs, Kidderminster carpets, pictures and engravings, numberless chests and coffers. The New York Herald spoke of scimitars of Arab make, damask bed curtains and counterpanes, English engravings, an oil painting of a gentleman, an old uniform of a West Indian soldier, brass blunderbusses, prints from illustrated newspapers, and among much else, copies of the Times of London. So some of what will be going back now was taken then. But let's turn to the second entirely joyful anniversary we record today, which is the centenary of the return of Nana Prempeh I from exile in Seychelles to Kumasi, authorized, you'll recall, by a British government that included my great-grandfather as Secretary of the Colonies. I'm sorry, it was the government before that, so it was the one with my great-grandfather. He was Labour leader of the House of Lords. That return initiated a period of peace and progress in Asante that continues to this day. My sisters and I grew up in Kumasi, the Kumasi of Nana Prempeh II. One of my happiest childhood memories is growing up to the palace after church on Sundays to sit with my mother on a veranda shaded with vines and wait for Nana Prempeh to come out and sit with us for a while, and I got my Fanta and my sisters got their Coca-Cola. Our meetings took place in the modest building the British had allowed Asante to build in the old palace grounds when the monarchy was restored after Nana Prempeh's predecessor returned from exile, a building that was replaced with a new modern palace after my father's brother-in-law, Otumfuo Nana Pukweri II, succeeded Nana Prempeh as Asantehene. That building is now home to the museum, whose contents will be enriched by these objects that will be returning from this museum and the Victoria and Albert Museum, and that's something very much to celebrate today. And we should all be grateful to Ivor Adjumandua and Malcolm MacLeod, old friend of Asante and once keeper of ethnography here at the British Museum, for successfully negotiating this happy outcome. The Kumasi of Nana Prampi II was a wonderfully cosmopolitan city. There were people there from all regions of Ghana and most of West Africa, speaking all the languages of Ghana and the region. Our main commercial thoroughfare was called Kingsway Street, though it's now Prempeh II Avenue. And in the 1960s, if you wandered down it towards the railway yards at the center of town, you would pass by Babu's Bazaar, which was run by a charming and courteous Indian. And I remember that we bought our rice from Irani brothers, that's Iran. And we often stopped in various Lebanese and Syrian families, and even the philosophical Druze named Mr. Hanif, who sold imported cloth and was always ready for a conversation with me about philosophy and with my mother about the troubles of his native Lebanon. There were other strangers among us too. In the military barracks in the center of town, you could find many northerners, faces etched in distinctive patterns of ethnic scarification. And then there were Europeans, a Greek architect, a Hungarian artist, an Irish doctor, a Scottish engineer, a French lady who taught us her language, English barristers and judges, and a wildly international assortment of professors at the university from every continent. Kumasi grew from war, but it has flourished now with these many years of peace. Its university, built on land given to it by Nana Prampi II, on whose campus I went to primary school, is now one of the great scientific universities of Africa. So I would like to thank Asante on behalf of my sisters and myself for the pleasure and privilege of having grown up in your wonderful city, sir. And indeed, the third and most joyful anniversary we celebrate today is the Silver Jubilee of your installation, sir, as the 16th Asante Hini. Your late mother, the magnificent Queen Mother of Asante, was one of my mother's very good friends. Whenever we visited her, my mother would greet her in a very English way, I'm afraid, with a kiss on the cheek. And so your mother used to joke when my mother arrived, "Mikunu Aba," my husband has come. So I heard talk of you, sir, from your proud mother long before you ascended the golden stool. It would take too long even to summarize the many achievements of your reign, but you have done so much to modernize a centuries-old kingdom while keeping faithful to our traditions. And I'd like to end, if you will permit me, sir, by picking out just three representative achievements that reflect the way you have continued our traditions while modernizing the monarchy. The first of these is your commitment to securing our natural environment. Lake Bosumtwi is one of the most extraordinary elements of the Asante landscape, a meteoric crater that has filled with water over the million years since it was created by an asteroid. You, sir, have led a project to plant 2.5 million trees around the lake, a place I know well because it was my father's parliamentary constituency in the 1950s. A second emblematic achievement of your reign has been the creation of the Otumfuo Osei Tutu II Charity Foundation that focuses on two themes of your administration: the education of Asante's children, our most precious asset, and the health of the people of Asante. But finally, sir, we should esteem you for your commitment to the process we are participating in today, your determined concern to honor Asante's extraordinary cultural heritage. Ladies and gentlemen, Nananum, please welcome His Royal Highness Otumfuo Nana Osei Tutu Ababio, the 16th Asante.